Welcome to Distilled Faith. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about making that transition from rote prayer to relational prayer. Welcome to Distilled Faith, the show about prayer. Have you ever felt like you were getting into a conversation, but you got off on the wrong foot, and it's just not the right tone? It's so important how we start our conversation to really set the tone for the rest of that, and especially in our relationship with God, to start from a point of relationship to really know the Lord in a personal way. So to talk about that today, we welcome John to the show. John, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Father Kevin. Very glad to be here.
And tell me a little bit about what you brought for us to share today.
Well, that's something I'm also excited to share with you. It's a nice little, very rare Irish whiskey that when I was a younger man in college, got to do some studying abroad and was in Ireland and found this little distillery that makes very rare Irish whiskey. I think you're going to enjoy it.
Awesome. I look forward to it. So John, tell me a little bit about your experience of rote versus relational prayer.
Yeah, so Father Kevin, obviously, I'm a cradle Catholic, and I grew up going to First Communion, CCD, and then doing a confirmation. And I just learned these are the prayers you're supposed to do. You learn the Our Father, the Hail Mary, the Glory Be, a couple of the others. And you do them right, and you pass the test when you go for your First Communion. That's pretty much was my exposure. And as a child, I think I did all right with those because I still know them. But as I got older and I started to realize there's more to it that I need to be investing. I looked around at our Protestant brothers and sisters, and they always talk about a personal relationship with Jesus. And I was like, well, yeah, we've got that because we've got the sacraments and he's right there. And what better could you go for than that? But there's something that they bring that's obviously not that. And I was curious, what is that? And I started kind of it's always been in the back of my head.
Yeah, so would you say that when you were learning those prayers growing up, that you were praying out of a personal relationship, or was it more memorization and just more scripted?
I think I was really blessed. My grandmother, I was told, I never sat there with her, but she always did a rosary for each of the grandkids. I don't know if it was one every day or every day we got one. But I feel like I knew as I was learning these prayers that God loved me, and I had a relationship in that sense, a fatherly kind of relationship. But Jesus kind of changes the whole thing, right? I mean, he's still one God, three parts, but he's more of you can communicate with him. He came here and was a man. So as I got older, that aspect of it started to take more root. So it's a little bit of both, to give a good lawyer answer.
Sure, a little bit of both. Yeah, well, as you mentioned, that many of us growing up, we learned prayers, but that's distinct from prayer. One is something that we say, and one is, like you said, something that is more like a relationship, right? So in my experience, many people, it's a little scary because the script, one of the nice things it gives you is you know what to say, you know what the structure is. But to go off script is like, oh man, I don't know what to say, where do I start? And that's what's so freeing, but also a little scary about what I would call conversational prayer and such. So can you tell me a little bit more about how you made that leap for yourself, or maybe even still in the struggle, how that's developing for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny you mentioned that. As I do the rote prayers and do the rosary and things like that, I definitely feel comfortable in it. But you can also I know there's some schools of thought, I guess there were, a theology that says that helps you get into a sync with the Lord by doing these things that kind of draw you into a meditative state by doing the rosary and those sort of things. But also you can fall into I'm just doing it really fast so I can get done, and you don't really contemplate on it. So I did try to, and I've always kind of tried to experiment and get into a little more conversational, but I didn't feel comfortable doing it because I was only taught the rote prayer way.
Yeah.
And when I would kind of branch out, and sometimes as an attorney, sometimes I would even address God as your honor, just trying to be
You're way up there on the bench.
Yeah, not on purpose, just being more casual. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm being too casual here. you know?
Well, it's interesting. So St. Ignatius, he helps speak to this point about like where we start the conversation, because I think that we're not even aware of the mindset or the perspective that we have when we begin those rote prayers, for example. And there's something that we can use from what St. Ignatius gives us that really is in common with whether we're beginning with rote prayer or we're beginning a more spontaneous conversation. And he tells his followers, and something that has been passed down through the generations, that when you go to prayer, when you're about to start that conversation with the Lord, to spend even for the space of 20, 30 seconds, he says the space of an Our Father, which is, not very long, but to start with not saying anything, but actually start with using your imagination to picture how God is beholding you. So you've already shared an image with us today of God up on the bench, right? The authority figure, or the king on the throne. But let me ask you this. What do you think, even in the moment, as I ask you today, like what is an image that comes to mind that helps you picture how God is beholding you in prayer?
That's a really good question. I don't think I've ever thought on that topic, but the one that pops into my head, and this is kind of what started me down the road of there's more to my faith, the Catholic faith, than just going to Mass and doing the rote, stricture that we have and doing the rote prayers, that it is relational. I took the Bible timeline course. And one of the things they talk about, and I'm sure I've heard it in different homilies too, is Zacchaeus is hiding in the tree, trying to get a glimpse of Jesus. And that makes me think of almost putting myself in that position of him, of Zacchaeus, and trying to get a glimpse of Jesus. And that's how God looks at this guy who, kind of was a little on the edge of society, at least as far as what he did. I think he was a tax collector. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So not really everybody's favorite. I think he was like kind of a really small guy too. So they were like, all right, you're just trouble. And Jesus still is like, get out of the tree and come take me to dinner.
Yeah. So even like a look with an invitation, right?
Yeah.
A look that is warm and welcoming. So imagine beginning, your prayer or that conversation, and just having that image with you. Like imagine how that would set the tone for the conversation so much more than just approaching a text. It really helps remind us that from the beginning, God is in relationship with us even before we're even conscious of starting that conversation. God is always beholding us. And so what St. Ignatius teaches us about starting off our prayer by imagining how God is looking upon me really helps to remember that relational aspect for whatever happens afterwards. So I know in my life, one of the things that really helps me to have a relational image is even a parent-child. I picture myself as a small child, just being held in God's arms, like a child in its parents' arms. But even that just has a tone of tenderness and generosity and safety for whatever follows after that. Because again, we got lots of things to say, but that helps us with that perspective of who's really initiating the relationship, and God is always present to us.
It's something that I really have started to do a lot more of. Was in Mass a couple years ago, and the homily was on that issue of having a more relationshipal type, that's not a word.
Well, we can make it one.
Yeah, relationship type of conversation with God and with Jesus and the Holy Spirit. And if you're mad, if you're upset, if you're worried, if you're scared, that's what you talk about with a friend and how you would talk to them.
Yes.
And that really kind of turned the key for me, or opened the door, or however you want to phrase it. It turned the light on, as it were. And I was really able to go, oh, okay, I can. Previously, I did the rote prayers, but then I would follow it up with a more petition type prayers of, help me with this and let me do that, and then leave it alone, instead of more of a conversational, I'm really kind of upset with you right now because these things.
Being real, being authentic.
Why are you making me go through these trials? It's difficult to come to terms with that. And like I said, I think I've been blessed with some grace to not turn away when I was in those places. And it's through good pastors, good family members, and people praying for me, I'm sure, that kept me to keep looking. So I know something's there.
Well, and it's so interesting too how sometimes we're not even aware of how we filter. Like we'll go to prayer and try to be very, gracious toward the Lord, but then we go to our friend and we tell him how we really feel. And so to try to make that transition, to talk to the Lord as if, to a friend, and really share everything without all that filtering and sugarcoating and all that, just the raw, genuine, I had a really crappy day today, whatever the case is.
Yeah, try to minimize the cuss words, I think, is important, but he understands. Yeah.
He knows what's in our heart, what's in our mind, even before we speak. That's right. Yeah, and Jesus at the Last Supper, that's what he says. I no longer call you servants, I call you friends. And so to think of whatever best friendships that we've had in our life, that's the model for us of how we talk, and just what we tell them, that's the model for how we can have that conversation with the Lord. Well, John, thank you so much for helping us just to unpack that today. I have a question for you.
Sure.
As far as you on your journey of faith going forward, what's something that gives you hope to persevere that in the journey that you're on?
I think it comes from praying more and doing what you and I have just been talking about, trying to be more relational. I am not going to get that
Relational.
word.
There
Relational.
we go.
That's
There
the
we go.
word. And it makes me think of, when I have had that experience where I think of, as I'm having a conversation, I imagine Jesus is there right there with me. And how would he be acting and responding? That gives me a lot of hope, and that there's more. The depth that you can find in your prayer life is indefinite. It can go as deep as you try. That gives me a lot of hope.
Well, yeah, and that's I think that's so great too, because as we're on that journey, like that's what the Lord desires, is to continue to deepen that. And there's great hope in that the Lord just continues to draw us deeper in relationship with him. So that's what it's all about.
Yes.
Well, is there a favorite quote or scripture or saying something that inspires you that we can share with our guests today, or share with our viewers today?
Sure. So I've always liked St. Joseph, because my middle name's Joseph, and that was my confirmation saint.
Nice.
But there are quotes from him, unfortunately, so we can imagine what he would have said too. But I generally go to one of my favorite scriptures is in Micah in 6:8, which is, and I paraphrase it because I think I found a nice little meme somewhere that says it's basically, what are we to do here to do what the Lord wants us to do? Because that's always kind of a search, and it's to act justly, show mercy, and walk humbly with the Lord. And I think if I try to do those things every day, having a relationship with him, I can probably do at least one of them and then go from there.
Nice. Yeah, and it's just keeping it real simple. Those are 3 great simple things we can apply in everyday life. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Working on it, but yeah.
Yes, we're all works in progress. Absolutely. Well, John, again, thank you so much for being our guest today, and look forward to having you back one day.
Wonderful.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Distilled Faith. Please like, share, and subscribe. We'd like to thank all of our supporters for the show, and we would like to encourage you to please consider becoming a patron to support future episodes. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Distilled Faith.